Jimmy, let's talk about this peace treaty that, according to the prophet Daniel, the Antichrist is going to sign with the nation of Israel. In Daniel 9:27, we find this information. He, that's the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7, and in the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. What are we talking about here?
You're talking about, John, seeing the clock start ticking on this 7-year tribulation period. There in Daniel 9:27, he's referring to the 7-year period of time, that 1 week, the 70th week of Daniel. And when he confirms, now listen to that verse again, and he, the Antichrist, shall confirm. That's not talking about signing. That word in Hebrew is gabar. It means confirm, strengthen, make stronger. There are a couple of peace treaties on the table, never been normalized, not working. But when the Antichrist comes on the scene, he will confirm them, strengthen them, make them work, and he will do that between the Jewish nation of Israel and all of their neighbors. By the way, those neighbors, when they see that happening, they will then move to go in and try to destroy the Jewish state. The coalition of nations from Ezekiel 38, Psalm 83, Daniel chapter 11 says, when they are at peace, dwelling safely in the land, that's when that peace treaty is put in place, then they attack the Jewish state. That would be the first 2 seal judgments in that 7-year period of time, happening after the rapture of the church. By the way, it talks about in the verse that you just referred to, Daniel 9:27, in the midst of the week, he will cause the sacrifice to cease. Well, there are other judgments in the first 3.5 years, but one of the things that has to happen, the temple needs to be standing at the midway point between the rapture and the second coming of Jesus Christ, because the abomination of desolation will take place there. The Antichrist, as we mentioned, walks into the Holy of Holies, claims to be God, and that is the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel. Jesus confirmed, saying, when you see that happening, flee for the wilderness, flee for the place I've prepared to protect you. We move then into the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period. You have 7 trumpet judgments, 7 vial judgments. The 7 trumpet judgments are found in chapters 8, 9, and 11. And as you read these passages of Scripture, you'll see ecological judgment. In other words, natural disasters happening across the world. The ocean will turn to blood. 1/3 of the fish in the ocean will die. The grass and the trees will be all burned up. That's the trumpet judgments. When we get to the vial judgments in chapter 16 of the book of Revelation, we see all of the ocean turns to blood. All of the fish in the sea die. All of the earth is under a judgment from God. The sun gets so hot it scorches man. He doesn't repent. He blasphemes God, and it culminates with a battle that's going to happen there in the city of Babylon. Babylon is going to be destroyed. It's actually not going to even be a battle in 1 hour. The book of Revelation chapter 18 says in verses 10, 17, and 19, in 1 hour, Babylon is destroyed. Now remember, biblical Babylon is modern day Iraq, and that's where the Antichrist will operate out of. After Jesus intercedes and destroys Babylon, all the armies of the world gather at Jerusalem for the battle of Armageddon, basically the campaign of Armageddon. You have probably 100 million soldiers that gather in Jerusalem. Jesus Christ steps back on the earth there on the Mount of Olives, opens up the way for them to flee to the valley of the mountains, and that's where the battle of Armageddon will take place. So we've traced then from the rapture, remember we're just before the rapture, it hasn't happened yet, from the rapture through the 7 years to the second coming of Christ.
Okay, you guys, I got some real exciting news. I can't hardly believe this. This is just too much. This latest news that just came out. You're never going to believe this. Let me read the article to you and I'll go over it with you. It's called, Hamas reportedly agrees to extend the ceasefire with Israel by 24 hours. So tonight at midnight, the ceasefire was supposed to be done, but now they're going to agree to extend it. But here is the exciting part. It's in the contents of this particular article. You're never going to believe this. Okay, so let me read it to you. Excuse me. This is too exciting. It says the reported deal comes after significant progress was made in Egyptian-mediated ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas according to Palestinian sources. Palestinian sources reported on Monday that a ceasefire with Israel was expected to be announced just before midnight on Monday. So that's today, just before midnight in Israel. They expected the ceasefire to be announced, but yes, they're now announcing it. A Hamas official said that the Islamist group had agreed to prolong the ceasefire by another 24 hours so as to follow for more negotiations with Egyptian officials in Cairo. Israeli officials, meanwhile, are denying that an agreement is in place. Palestinian news agency Mayan reported that the Israeli delegation had left Cairo and was set to return to Israel and present the cabinet with the ceasefire agreement to be approved. So here we have the Palestinians are going to return to Israel. They had left. The Israeli delegation had left Cairo, is what happened. With the Palestinian agreement and the Egyptian agreement in hand, they are set to return to Israel and present the cabinet with the ceasefire agreement to be approved. The reported deal comes after significant progress was made in Egyptian-mediated ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, according to the Palestinian sources. While there is no word regarding the nature of the discussions, a number of websites affiliated with Islamic Jihad, as well as independent Palestinian sources, say there has been greater movement by both sides toward a deal. There is optimism, and it seems as if the chances of reaching an agreement are better than they have ever seen, that has ever been seen thus far, said a Palestinian source currently in Cairo. Sources in Cairo told the Mayan news agency that the Egyptian government has presented a two-tiered plan, one security-oriented and the other political. Excuse me here. It just refreshed itself while I was reading it, so excuse me, I'll have to find my spot. Okay, so a two-tiered plan, one security-oriented and the other political, which includes a mechanism that could lead to a lifting of the siege on Gaza. A 6-hour negotiating session today, as well as a 9-hour session on Sunday, led to an agreement in a number of areas, a Palestinian source is quoted as telling Mayan. Earlier Monday, an Egyptian official told the U.S.-backed Arab language station Radio Sawa that until the afternoon, there was no progress in talks between the sides. This is what I heard yesterday, so a lot can change in just a couple of hours. Tarek Fahimi, the head of the Israeli unit at the Egyptian National Center for Middle East Studies, said that the goal of the talks today is to neutralize the main crisis points, particularly the question of the Gaza airport and Israeli concessions regarding the sea, as well as the issue of the tunnels. Fahimi said that the negotiating sessions that took place on Monday were critical. The negotiation sessions that took place today were critical. Israel insists on demilitarizing the Gaza Strip from rockets and missiles. And listen to this part. This is very important. And the declaration of a ceasefire that would last between 5 and 7 years, he said. The Palestinian side is yet to compromise on any of the key questions. So let me read that again. And the declaration, which is an announcement, declaration means announcement, of a ceasefire that would last between 5 and 7 years, he said. 7 years? Fahmy added that there was an American proposal to bring the talks before UN mediation if the Cairo discussions failed to produce a deal. Throughout Monday and over the weekend, Egypt pressured both sides, both Israel and Hamas, to reach an agreement on a long-term ceasefire before the current truce expires at midnight local time. So it looks like they were very successful. According to the official reports, Cairo has proposed a ceasefire that would see Palestinian Authority personnel supervise the border crossings. The two sides would then resume discussions for a long-term agreement next month. Let me read that again. The two sides would then resume discussions for a long-term agreement next month. Are we talking September 24th? Feast of Trumpets? Future negotiations would tackle thorny issues, including Hamas demands to permit the operations of a seaport and an airport in Gaza. Israel is adamantly opposed to this. Officials in Jerusalem are reportedly demanding that Hamas return the bodies of 2 IDF soldiers who were killed during the Gaza ground incursion and whose remains are believed held by the Palestinian Islamic group. There has been no mention of whether the issue of lifting the blockade has been discussed or will be discussed in future talks. Israeli officials have reportedly tried to insert improvements since the Egyptian initiative. Jerusalem is also seeking to put off negotiations on the most contentious issues until a later date. The bad negative corrections proposed by the Israeli team have made the situation worse, said a member of the Palestinian delegation. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole article. There's more to it. I'll just leave the link below. But here, the important aspects here is that they're going to come up with a long-term peace agreement next month, is what it says. Next month, they hope to have a long-term peace agreement. And from 5 to 7 years. 7 years. Is this a 7-year peace agreement covenant in the book of Daniel? Wow, this is exciting. Anyway, you guys keep looking up. The link is below. God bless, and I'll keep you updated. Hi guys, I have some more exciting news for you today regarding the peace agreement. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. This is truly falling in line with Feast of Trumpets. Okay, let me contain myself here. This is just too much joy for me. Anyway, and I hope you guys get the same out of this as well. Several countries now are asking the UN Security Council members to pass a ceasefire resolution for Gaza. This is significant news as they are trying to get the UN to take over the region and force a peace deal among all the nations with a UN mandate, which would make the deal an international law. Only 15 nations would need to sign on to create this mandate, but inadvertently all nations will become involved because they are all members of the United Nations. This would then be considered a covenant of many, which would also include the Antichrist signing, the Pope, and everybody else, because the whole world is involved with the United Nations. Oh my gosh. So let me read these articles to you. One came out yesterday and one came out today, and they're all about how there are nations that are trying to force this UN mandate. The links are going to be below, so let me read this to you. Okay, this is the article that came out today. It says, report France and UK preparing Security Council resolution to end Gaza fighting. So the France and the UK are preparing a Security Council resolution. They're going to present it to the UN Security Council, a resolution to stop the fighting in Gaza. France and Britain are reportedly working with the US backing, on draft resolutions intended to be submitted to the UN Security Council for a binding vote aimed at ending the fighting in the South. The U.S. has veto power at the United Nations Security Council, and any resolution would need its active or tactic support. Jordan, separately from the European states, has attempted to pass a resolution on the Gaza conflict since July, with little success. The UN Security Council on Wednesday expressed grave concern at the resumption of hostilities in Gaza between Israel and Palestinians and called upon the parties to resume negotiations to urgently reach a sustainable and lasting ceasefire. The 15-member Security Council also called upon the parties to prevent the situation from escalating and to reach an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, says British UN Ambassador Mark Lyle Grant, President of the Council for August. Okay, so that is that article. Now I have another one, just a second. And this one came out yesterday, this other article. Like I said, I'll put the links below. It says, Amman asks Security Council members to pass a ceasefire resolution. The latest version of draft resolution, authored by Jordan, calls for an end to the blockade and intensified international arrangements to prevent arms and ammunition smuggling. So here now we have Jordan presenting a resolution to the UN. Jordan is lobbying member states of the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the blockade. The latest version of the draft resolution, authored by Jordan and dated August 4th, calls for the respect of previous Security Council resolutions, particularly Resolution 1860, which was passed in January 2009 toward the end of Operation Cast Lead, and calls for an end to the blockade and intensified international arrangements to prevent arms and ammunition smuggling. Both parties ultimately ignored the resolution. This draft resolution that Jordan has been circulating through the Security Council also calls for the respect of international humanitarian law, international, see the word international, humanitarian law, that's the United Nations, and of the inviolability of UN facilities, and expressed grave concern over the humanitarian conditions in the Gaza Strip, particularly with regard to the sanitation infrastructure, water, and medical facilities. Echoing the request in recent weeks by the Secretary General and UN aid councils, the resolution calls the current situation in Israel and Palestine unsustainable and emphasizes the need for a double ceasefire. Following a meeting of the Security Council on Tuesday afternoon, Jordanian Ambassador Dina Kawar said that council members, particularly European member states, are making suggestions about language to add. The U.S. is likely to use its veto power in the Security Council in this case. Iona Thomas, the head of press for the UK mission, whose ambassador Mark Lyle Grant is president of the Security Council, said Jordan had not initiated conversation about the resolution in the past week, since fighting had calmed a bit and attention turned to the Cairo talks on a ceasefire, and that there had been no push to pass a resolution in the Council. The draft resolution is still on the table and up for discussion, according to Thomas. The Jordanians have not withdrawn it, but they also have not called for a vote on the text. Given the activity of the past few weeks, Thomas said that the August 4th draft resolution was outdated and that she could not anticipate the Security Council voting on it without first making changes. The UK mission spokeswoman was not in the expert-level meeting to discuss the draft resolution, but she said she has not heard that a call for war crimes changes against Israel would be included. In a letter to Grant dated August 20th, PLO ambassador to the United Nations, Ryan Mozar, demanded that the Council look at Jordan's recent draft resolution and pass it quickly. Oh my gosh, did you hear that? He recommended that that they look at Jordan's resolution and pass it quickly. Oh my goodness. The PLO ambassador wrote that the resolution represents a sound basis for serious action to be taken, and we urge the Council members to undertake this responsibility without delay. Did you guys hear that? He wants them to pass this draft resolution without delay. The Palestinian ambassador also condemned Israel and called on the Security Council to demand an immediate halt to the Israel military aggression. Palestinian officials have been jockeying to join the International Criminal Court in order to levy war crimes against Israel. The U.S. has been urging the court not to open a case against Israel, and on Tuesday, the State Department spokeswoman said she cannot envision a scenario in which the U.S. would vote for a UN resolution calling for the ICC to charge Israel with war crimes. Yeah, but they don't really know what he might do, what Obama might do in this situation. Nobody really knows. Thomas said she had no reason to believe such language would be considered and added to this draft resolution by Jordan. Though the Security Council is in agreement that a resolution regarding the situation in Israel and the Palestinian territories must be passed, the member states are split about when the Council would take action. According to the PLO's Deputy Permanent Advisor to the UN, Feda Elbenadi, saying that we have to wait for Cairo is not the Palestinian position, because we believe that the Council should have acted from before, that they were not parallel tracks that should have fed into the other. Nations on the Security Council that believe a resolution coming after a truce reached between the parties would strengthen that truce include the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Lithuania, and Rwanda, according to the PLO's Deputy Permanent Observer. So there we are, folks. All the nations are getting involved, and they're going to get involved in this, passing this resolution. It's called a UN resolution that would cause them to have a mandate over the Gaza area and cause everyone involved to abide by their rules. And they can cause the whole world to sign on to this agreement, or if they don't sign on to the agreement, they're still involved because they're members. So this is really interesting. I mean, I am so excited about this, you guys. This is better news than I ever thought would happen. So here we have the covenant of many is coming out with the Antichrist and everybody being involved. It's perfect biblical prophecy coming to pass here. It's like perfectly in line. Anyway, the links are below, you guys. I will keep you updated. Keep looking up. God bless.